So yesterday there was a bit of a celebration online after Sony made the surprising announcement that they were going to be changing their minds when it came to shutting down the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita stores. The PlayStation Portable, that's still getting shut down, but I really do question how many people picked up their PSP after hearing this announcement of these store closures. Most likely everyone picked up either a Vita or a PlayStation 3 controller and started going through all of the different games that they had not picked up yet and just secure them on the system. But either way, it did shock a lot of people that Sony made this reversal so soon after making the original announcement, and it is making people wonder currently online, did Sony get the message about backwards compatibility in some of their legacy system? Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So this was the announcement that was made yesterday on PlayStation blog, where they said when we initially came to the decision to end purchasing support for PS3 and PS Vita, it was born out of a number of factors, including commerce support challenges for older devices and the ability for us to focus more of our resources on newer devices where a majority of our gamers are playing on. So immediately it's brought up the checkout process, or just the way that they are really handling these transactions, which has been, a problem for the direction they're going in with things like the PlayStation 5 and their overall ecosystem. And like I said before, Jim Ryan is he's a bit of a numbers guy, right? He's looking around at what they do and what they don't need, and okay, well, we can cut these things out that people aren't really using that much. But all of a sudden, they change their minds on this. And there's a few things we could look at with this. One, it could be that the PR got so bad around what they were doing with their game preservation that they said, well, we have to change course on this and at least keep these stores open for a little longer until we can figure out a way to soften the blow maybe on this whole thing. Because if you think about it, they announced that these stores were closing 3 months out. And for some Vita developers, they were caught off guard. They just got development kits. And all of a sudden, the store that they were going to be releasing their game on is going away. And they had to decide, all right, can we get this game out a couple of months from now? Because there is still a lot of things that have to happen just outside of development. You still have to get your game approved to be on the store by Sony, and that can on its own be a pretty lengthy process. So it's interesting still that they decided to change their minds on something that probably would have saved them quite a bit of money at the end of the day. They go on to say, we see now that many of you are incredibly passionate about being able to continue purchasing classic games on PS3 and PS Vita for the foreseeable future. So I'm glad we were able to find a solution to continue operations. I'm glad that we can keep this piece of our history alive for gamers to enjoy while we continue to create cutting-edge new game worlds for PS4, PS5, and the next generation of VR. So obviously they're bringing up the newer systems, VR and all of this, and kind of looking back on the PlayStation 3 and the Vita, even though the Vita isn't that old, if you really think about it. It's 10 years old now, starting this year. The PS3, yeah, that's a bit old. It's 15 years old. So that one is considered retro by actually quite a few gamers now, with the cycles that seem to happen where I might look at something like the Super Nintendo and see that as retro. There are going to be people now in their early 20s who are going to look at the PS3 and consider that to be retro because it's what they grew up with. Maybe their dad or parents or big brother or somebody was playing the PS3 and they just kind of sat there and watched, and now they want to go back and play these games, but the store is getting shut down. So like I said, this all happens in cycles where things that don't feel retro to some of us are retro to others. But it is interesting to note that this entire thing was apparently written out by Jim Ryan, or at least attached his name to it. But the fact that they changed their mind around this whole situation due to feedback from the gaming community it's interesting to think about that, because originally we have heard from Jim Ryan several times, right? Oh, why would anyone want to play these older games? Obviously, it didn't seem like he was that interested in something like the PlayStation Classic. And I mean, let's face it, the PlayStation Classic came out, it wasn't that good when they released it, and it does look like from the outside that Jim Ryan was correct about who wants to play the old Gran Turismo when they're having a hard time selling the PlayStation Classic. The only issue I have with that is the PlayStation Classic just was not put together that well, and they could have done a much better job on things like game selection or just the overall OS and options that they had available when they launched the thing. In fact, the community around it has done a much better job supporting and trying to figure out ways to make the experience better, but that also includes adding a bunch of ROMs that I'm sure, we would have Sony not be able to do through rights and all of this. But the question now is, has Sony really gotten a message that people are interested in these older games, and could they make money off of this? Because that's what it's going to boil down to. Really looking at this, they probably saw a lot of traffic come in to the PlayStation 3 and maybe even the Vita. I actually think a lot more came into the PlayStation 3 than the Vita, but who knows? I mean, the Vita is technically a newer system, but still, there are probably a lot of people who looked at the selection of games on the PS3 and realized, well, this is how I'm going to play something like Metal Gear Solid 4. I guess I'd better make sure that's downloaded and on the system. Or maybe you're someone who's been trying to pick up some of the older PS1 games that are pretty cheap on the PS3 compared to what's on eBay with something like Misadventures of Tron Bond. So I get why you might go on there and drop $6 or $7 on that just to make sure you have it, maybe for a rainy day in the future where you want to go back and try it out. But if the traffic spiked so heavily to the point where even they looked around and said, wow, people really want these games, could they have kind of seen the light, I guess you could say, with these older games and maybe work them into some future plans for the PlayStation? Because there have been a lot of talks around the idea of a Game Pass counterpunch from Sony, and I see no way that can include any of their newer titles. That's the biggest thing, because people are like, well, if you're going to have a Game Pass counterpunch, you have to either have a large quantity of games for a selection, which PlayStation Now has continued to do that. The problem they have with PlayStation Now is branding, because people still think you stream all of those games, and PlayStation 3 games, you do. But PS2 games, which there are PS2 games on there, you can download. And then PlayStation 4 games, you do the same. But if they get to a point where they have PlayStation 5 games available on there, which they're still, I guess, working towards, that are downloadable, and then they go back and say, well, we have a PS1 emulator, we have a PS2 emulator, you can use it now on the PS5, and we have a PSP emulator. Maybe we just start, like, building out maybe our own Game Pass counterpunch with the selection from PlayStation Now. We change the name, and then we also have like this full retro section for the PlayStation legacy, right? They could probably name it something cool and have all the different logos, and maybe they even work in the different startup sounds based on the game that you start up. Like, there's a lot of cool things they could do here for gamers who remember the old days of Sony and the PlayStation. Now, that would take a massive shift, I'm sure, in plans based on how we've heard Jim Ryan talk about the older games, but I'm sure they're also searching for a way to counter Game Pass without taking their games day one that they are spending quite a bit of money developing, as we've heard from reports now that they are looking for big budget, highly rated games if they can keep that kind of stuff off of their Game Pass counterpunch and more or less lean on older games that apparently people do want, from what we are seeing here with an entire course change around shutting down digital stores that probably would have saved them money. Why not try it? The emulators are there. I don't know if they'll get to a point where you can put a disc in something like the PlayStation 5, but I kind of feel like maybe Sony did notice something here and realize that there could be money to be made here, and these storefronts will stay up until they have a way for you to essentially carry over to the PlayStation 5, and then they'll see if people really want this stuff, because then they'll be asking them to put their money where their mouth is. But let me know what you guys think about this whole situation down below, with them changing their minds when it comes to shutting down the different legacy storefronts, and the idea of Sony going back into their library of games and systems and basically building out their own Game Pass style thing, PlayStation Now, but just rebranded with a large selection of older classic titles. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.